The goal of this video is to help you get started quickly with SolidWorks, even when no one's around to help you. What we want to do is get the program up and running. The way to do that, it's already installed in your computer. Just type SolidWorks down into the search bar and get it going. It'll take a second to upload. The goal here, though, is to not tell you everything about SolidWorks during this few minutes of video time, but instead just to point to a few major things that you might want to pay attention to. Here we've got File View Tools Help, that sort of thing. That's only there because I've pinned it in place. I suggest doing that because you will need to access the file element of this multiple times. When you start a new file, you have the option to create a part file, an assembly file, or a drawing. Today we're going to talk about parts and drawings, and you need to do that for solid modeling exercise number 1. We don't need to worry about assemblies yet. So starting a new part file, I recommend that you always do the following thing when you start a new part file. The first thing you should do is go down to this bottom corner and choose the units that you want to be in. It becomes a bit problematic later to try to switch halfway through a model. So I'm going to switch to millimeters, grams, and seconds, which is what the MMGS stands for. And I can see now in the status bar that I am in the MMGS units. I'm also going to save my file immediately to the spot where I want to keep it kept. You're going to need to save your parts frequently. One of the reasons for this is that you are going to be doing things to the CAD system that's going to cause it to crash, especially as you're learning to use the CAD system, and therefore it's important that you save often. Okay, so I'm just going to do an example 1 here. By the way, you can see in this area that I have created a whole folder just for solid modeling exercise number 1. It will be very important for you to be organized in your file management because there's a lot of files that you're going to create. All right, so now I've got my unit set up. I've got my file name, which I can now see up here. I can save this as often as I need to. And now I just want to talk about the basic layout of the screen and what you're looking at. I think we could start with the items that are in this area. This represents the visuals that you will see while you're working in the window directly below it. So for example, if I want to come in here, I can turn on and off all of these things. I want to turn on the main planes, the top plane, the front plane, and the right plane. I like to work with those on, so almost always when I start a file, I come in here and I turn those on, and during the process you'll turn them off and you'll turn them on when you want them in and out of the way. On the left hand side of the screen you're going to see what's called the design tree or the feature manager. And in this design tree, you're going to see all the operations that we'll create. They will all show up right here. And that turns out to be really useful because during the process, we may need to rearrange some things or go back and edit features, and this lists them all out in the order that they were created. The next thing for us to pay attention to here is that up in this area and these tabs right here, this represents the set of tools that you'll be using the most. And at the beginning of the class, you'll be using largely the Features tab, which includes extrusions and cuts and some other things, and the Sketching tab, and then also a little bit of the Evaluate tab. So you're going to want to make sure you become familiar with those, know what's in them, know how to use them, and so on and so forth. So if we now think about creating our very first solid, we get to ask ourselves how we're going to do that. And pretty much the way to imagine creating a solid is we need to imagine taking a 2D sketch and turning it into a 3D shape. And the way we do that is we first create a sketch, a 2D sketch in the computer on one of these planes. And you can see on this left-hand side in yellow, it's always asking me what I need to do. Select the plane onto which you want to create the sketch entity. Well, I like to draw on the top plane, so I'm going to draw on the top plane. And I'm going to create a rectangle. And I'm going to go right near the origin here, and you can see there's a little yellow icon next to my pencil. It means it's going to try to tie that to the origin. Okay, and now I've created a rectangle. Okay, now I could stop right here and just kind of be done with this. In fact, let's do that just to make this clear about what's going on. Okay, so now I have my sketch. I'm looking at it from the top view. That's the one that I just drew. But if I want to see this in another view, the way that I need to do this is click the center mouse button, hold it down, and rotate. Not rotate, just move side to side, pan, or whatever, and my parts will rotate all around. Now sometimes when you're working in this kind of environment, it can become visually confusing, and so you can go kind of back up to our bar up here that talks about what we're going to see, and we can say we were kind of really interested in seeing a particular orientation. Now I'm back to basically the same orientation that I was in before. Now the other thing to know here is that I can go in and out, zooming, just scrolling the click wheel. Now, depending on where my cursor is sitting, it will zoom in or out based on where I am. It's basically going to zoom in on where the mouse cursor is. Okay, so what we could do now with this sketch is we can extrude it, and that's a feature. So I'm going to go to feature, and I'm going to go to extrude boss base. Okay, now in this extrude it says select the plane onto which I want to sketch something, or select an existing sketch. And when I hover over the sketch that I want to select, part of it will turn orange. And now I can see that I have this solid that it wants to create. And of course, over here on the left, there's a lot of things that I can look at here. I can choose some distance that I might want to extrude that through. I'm going to choose 30 millimeters in this case. And I hit OK on that, and now I have a solid. Now if I want to see that solid kind of outside of the context of these planes, I just turn those off and on, which I can do right there. Okay, if for some reason I also needed to see this in some other view, such as with hidden lines, I can control all of that stuff right there. Okay, now one of the main characteristics that I want to talk about in terms of parametric design is that we created this part, and this part exists now as a shape that's 30 millimeters tall, but we really don't have any clue how wide it is or how long it is. Now I can come over to the design tree, and I can notice something important. Next to this sketch there's a minus sign, and that means that the sketch is not fully constrained, which means the computer had to make its own choices about what dimensions I wanted, and that's not good. I want to be in control of all the dimensions. So if I right click on that, and I can find the edit icon, and I can go edit that sketch. Now one of the things I really like to do is I always like to look at my sketches on a top-down view. So if I right click on the sketch, I can get right to my top-down view. Now if I want to remember where my axes are, I can see that that's where the axes are. Now in here I can put dimensions on this and control the shape, and I'm going to use this Smart Dimension feature. So if I go to the Smart Dimension feature, click Align, come on up here, I can now see that that's 50 millimeters. Okay, I want to go 30 millimeters. I'm going to see if I can get myself a cube. Okay, and I'm going to come over here and do the same thing. And now I've got I will have a 30 by 30 millimeter cube. Now the most important thing that I want to point out relative to what we just did is that right down here we now have a box that says fully defined. And in fact, I'm going to cancel this, which I can do right here, and show you what it looks like when that's not the case. So I'm going back into this one. I want to edit this sketch. Right now it says underdefined, and because it says underdefined, it means the computer's making its own choices, and I want to be in control of this. So I'm gonna do that by not letting any of it be underdefined. So at this point, if I selected that one, if I kept that one, which I did, but it's not the dimension I want, I just double click on it and I can write the new one and it will update. Now I'm fully defined and I hit good on that I want that, and now I'm a perfect cube. All right, so there's other options here, and by the way, you can see the minus sign no longer sits next to that sketch, which is really, really valuable. Okay, so now just to hit this home just a little bit more, if I wanted to put a cut, a hole, right down the middle of this, I would do that by subtracting material. Now I like to be aware of where my origin is, and my origin is at the connection of these three planes. So I tend to like to look at things with my origin being this point right down here that's the closest to me. If I want to blast a hole in here all the way through, I've got a couple of options. I can do that from the top or I can do that from the bottom. Whenever I have a choice for this kind of thing, I like to do it from one of the fixed planes, because those fixed planes are not going to disappear. They're always going to be a part of this model. So I'm going to sketch, and I'm going to sketch on that bottom plane, and that didn't do it. I messed up there somewhere. Okay, I want to create a new sketch. I'm going to do it on this bottom plane, and now I can see that sketch 2 has a minus sign, and also I'd really love to look at it from the top down. So there we go. Now I'm going to take my circle and pop it in there. Now you can see I made a circle, and I didn't even pay attention to kind of where it went. I was just trying to be quick, and that's essentially the way to do it. And then to use the dimensioning to put that circle exactly where you want. So I think this center needs to be at 15 because it was 30mm box. Now my center's at 15. When I did that, I selected off of this right plane. But it turns out that I could have done it off of the side face, meaning this face, but I didn't want to do that because I know that the plane will always exist. And so I want to do it off the plane if I can. Okay, I set this one to 15 as well. Now my circle's right in the middle. The question now is, how big do I want that circle to be? Okay, I'm going to make that 20mm in diameter. Okay, so all I did at this point was I drew a sketch. Okay, now that sketch is highlighted blue at this moment because it's highlighted over here on the design tree. And when that's the case, if I click over to the features, then it already knows that I want that sketch because it was highlighted. Any cut and extrusion that you do, it's going to do it in one direction or the other. And when it doesn't go the direction that you want, you simply click on this button here that pushes it the other direction. Okay, and you can see the preview in yellow, and we're good to go. We just created that hole. Okay, let's see if there's one other thing I can show you. I showed you basically the method here of creating a sketch and then doing an operation on the sketch, but I can also show you what happens when I want to just kind of forego the sketch version and go straight to making a feature. It's still going to have me make a sketch, but it's all going to be kind of embedded. So if I want to create a box right next to this one, I'm going to go into the extrude, okay, and it says select a plane that I want to do this on. I'm going to select that plane. Now you can see again I got a negative sign there, which means whatever's going on in sketch 3, it's underdefined. Okay, and in this case I'm going to put a box. I'm just going to put it like this right now. Okay, I've not tied it really to anything, but what I do know that I want to do is have this be the same size box as my previous one. So that's 30mm. Okay, and 30mm. Okay, and then I want this edge and this plane to have a 0 distance between them. Okay, and then I want this plane and this plane here to essentially have zero distance between them. But I'm going to go for whatever's going on the front plane, because I know the front plane is going to always exist. So I have chosen to dimension off of that. And now we can see down here that we are fully defined. And because we're fully defined, we are good to go. And when I hit good on this, it's going to take the previous number that was used for an extrude and pop it in there. So that was 30. In this case, I want to try for something, say, different than 30. I want to go up to 60. And there I've got my part the way that I want it. Now, I think there's one thing I do want to talk about on that for a second. Let me edit that feature. It will be valuable for you, if your computer is not defaulted to it yet, is to have this clicked that says merge result. Okay, if we don't have merge result, what happens is I have two boxes right next to each other. And having those two boxes right next to each other can cause some problems if indeed I'm wanting the entire thing to be a solid. Okay, so I'm turning that back into my solid and I'm taking it. Okay. All right, one more thing I want to say here. We would use the design tree to help us turn on and off features, and we can do that by moving this blue thing. Okay, if I move it up here, for example, it eliminates everything that has gone on underneath it, and then I can get it back by moving the bar down. Or I can go to a feature such as this cut, and I can right-click on it, and I can suppress it and make it go away. It's still there. I can bring it back anytime I want, but for the next operation, I want it not to be there. Okay, so in this case, I have a 30 by 30 by 30 millimeter cube, another 30 by 30 by 30, another 30 by 30 right over here. So if I want to see if my mass properties are right, meaning if I built the solid exactly the way I thought I should build it, what would the answer to that be? 81,000 millimeters cubed. If I was wanting to know what the mass properties were of this, I can go to evaluate and I can do mass properties. Okay, and dang, what do I get? Exactly what I wanted, 81,000 cubic millimeters. Okay, that's 30 by 30 by 30 by 3. Okay, so in this video we've done a number of things. We showed you how to get in and get started. We've shown you how to choose the units. We've shown you how to save a file. We showed you kind of the basic layout of the screen. We showed you how to create an extrusion, next to another extrusion. Showed you how to make sure your stuff was fully defined, fully constrained. Showed you how to turn on and off things in the design tree. And that's about it. Hopefully you'll find that useful and will help you in getting going.